The flashing lights of an ambulance hide some of the most strictly guarded secrets in the medical world. The heroes coming to save your life are bound by rules so frustrating you will not believe they actually exist. Forget the dramatic television shows. Today, we are uncovering 50 of the craziest, most unbelievable mandates paramedics must obey in the field. By the end of this video, your entire perspective on emergency rescue will be permanently altered. 1. Kiss your expensive designer wardrobe goodbye if things suddenly go south. When a critical medical crisis strikes, first responders are legally mandated to gain rapid physical access to your chest and injuries. They will absolutely not spend precious time gently unbuttoning your vintage silk shirt or carefully removing a tricky zipper. Instead, they bust out heavy-duty trauma shears and aggressively slice your favorite outfit down the middle in 3 seconds flat. Fashion totally takes a backseat to oxygen. 2. Imagine knowing exactly what is wrong with someone, but the law permanently gags you. Even if an emergency medical technician with 2 decades of street experience spots a textbook stroke, they cannot officially say it out loud. Bureaucratic protocols strictly forbid them from giving a definitive diagnosis because that is exclusively a licensed doctor's job. Therefore, they are forced to use incredibly vague clinical jargon like altered mental status instead. It is a wildly frustrating legal dance where your lifesaver basically acts like a highly trained guesser. 3. Hollywood has completely lied to you about how heroes move. You always see actors sprinting dramatically toward a casualty, but in the real world, running is strictly against protocol. Sprinting naturally spikes a rescuer's adrenaline, induces dangerous tunnel vision, and massively increases the chance of tripping and shattering thousands of dollars of fragile gear. So, crews are trained to execute a highly focused, aggressive power walk. A hero who trips and breaks their own ankle on the sidewalk is utterly useless to everyone involved in the crisis. 4. Silence is occasionally the absolute most terrifying sound you can hear from an emergency vehicle. Crews are actually instructed to turn off their blazing strobe lights and deafening sirens for specific situations, particularly involving severe anxiety or massive cardiac events. The intense noise drastically spikes blood pressure, essentially turning a bad medical episode into a fatal one. So, if a rig is cruising quietly down your street, the patient inside might actually be too dangerously stressed out to handle the terrifying concept of an ambulance. 5. Gravity simply does not care about your current medical emergency. Protocol rigidly dictates that patients must be tightly strapped into the stretcher using heavy shoulder and leg restraints at all times, regardless of how critical they are. Physics remains undefeated, and crews cannot practically start an IV or perform chest compressions on a person flying across the back of a swerving van. 6. Leave the emotional support iguana on the sidewalk because your furry friend is definitely staying behind. Unless you possess a legally registered, highly trained service animal, first responders are barred from turning their sterile workspace into a mobile veterinary clinic. The extreme liability of a terrified house cat turning the back of an ambulance into a swirling blender of claws while an EMT works is just too high. 7. There is no official billing code for sheer human stupidity, but crews still have to treat it like a major trauma. Medics frequently encounter individuals who dial 911 simply because they cannot locate their television remote or have a mild sniffle. Despite the glaring absurdity of the situation, the crew is legally bound to perform a comprehensive medical assessment. They must maintain a totally straight, professional face while carefully checking the vital signs of a profoundly bored citizen. It is an absolutely exhausting daily test of profound patience. 8. Trying to slip a $20 tip to the person who just saved your life is incredibly illegal. First responders operate under strict anti-bribery and ethical mandates that completely forbid them from accepting cash or expensive gifts from patients. No matter how incredibly grateful you are for their excellent service, offering money legally looks like a bribe for preferential treatment. If you really want to show your deep appreciation, buying a simple box of donuts for the local station is the only officially acceptable currency they can take. 9. Calling emergency services every single day does not get you banned. It just earns you a sarcastic nickname. Medics deal with frequent flyers who constantly fake illnesses just because they are lonely. Despite knowing it is a completely false alarm, strict liability laws force crews to perform a full, serious medical workup every single time. They can never legally assume the caller is crying wolf, because the one time they ignore the boy, it might be a real heart attack. Would you have the patience to treat the exact same fake cough for the 10th time? 10. The ultimate late-night loophole in emergency medicine is the dreaded "you call, we haul" mandate. If a completely uninjured, perfectly healthy person demands a ride to the hospital at 3 in the morning just to cure a slight headache, crews often have zero legal authority to deny them. They cannot legally advise the person to just order a cheap taxi instead. This incredibly absurd rule ties up highly valuable emergency resources for totally non-medical reasons. It transforms highly trained lifesavers into the world's most overqualified Uber drivers. 11. Strict safety protocols dictate that medical personnel cannot enter an active crime scene until police officially secure the area. If someone is injured during a domestic dispute or a robbery, the ambulance must park several blocks away and simply wait out of sight. This rigid rule is known as staging. They are unarmed medical professionals, not tactical SWAT members. Rushing blindly into an unpredictable situation only creates more victims. 12. Your grieving family cannot verbally cancel your resuscitation. First responders are legally required to perform CPR on a pulseless patient unless a valid, physically signed "do not resuscitate" order is literally handed to them. A spouse crying and begging them to stop because it is what they would have wanted holds absolutely zero legal weight in the field. Without that specific piece of paper, medics must aggressively attempt to save your life, regardless of terminal illnesses. It is a heartbreaking reality of medical law prioritizing documentation over words. 13. You will almost never see an ambulance engine turned off while parked at a chaotic scene. This is not out of laziness. It is a vital operational mandate. The back of that truck is essentially a rolling hospital room, pulling massive amounts of electricity to run monitors, oxygen compressors, and the critical climate control that keeps sensitive medications from spoiling. If they shut off the ignition, the entire system would drain the battery in minutes, stranding them permanently. Leaving the heavy diesel engine rumbling is their only option. 14. Nosy neighbors will get absolutely nothing but total silence from the crew. First responders are bound by incredibly strict federal privacy laws regarding patient information. If the lady next door rushes out to ask why you are being loaded onto a stretcher, the medics cannot even confirm your name, let alone explain your medical condition. They are trained to offer a polite but firm wall of professional silence. This absolute secrecy ensures your most vulnerable, embarrassing medical moments never become neighborhood gossip. Your secrets are legally safe. 15. Carrying a legally registered firearm? You are definitely not bringing it inside the ambulance. Strict safety mandates absolutely forbid any weapons in the patient compartment, regardless of your concealed carry permits or personal background. Before you are loaded for transport, any firearms or dangerous knives must be secured by local law enforcement or safely left behind with family. The back of a moving ambulance is a highly chaotic, unpredictable environment, and introducing a loaded weapon into that tight space is a catastrophic risk they will never take. 16. Paramedics will aggressively shine a bright flashlight directly into the eyes of an unconscious patient to look for hidden plastic. Discovering contact lenses is a vital protocol before a long transport. If a patient is completely knocked out and their eyes remain closed for hours, contact lenses can permanently fuse to the cornea and cause total blindness. Medics must carefully document their presence so the emergency room doctors know to manually remove them. It is a tiny, easily missed detail that perfectly protects your vision while you are fighting to live. 17. You might notice that emergency vehicles suddenly shut off their blazing sirens just a block or two before actually arriving at the hospital. This is a strict courtesy protocol designed to maintain peace around the medical campus. Blasting a deafening air horn right next to recovery windows where sick patients are resting is considered highly unprofessional. The dramatic noise stops, and they quietly coast into the specialized ambulance bay. It is a sudden, eerie silence that completely contradicts the intense medical chaos happening inside the truck. 18. Checking a patient's pulse seems incredibly simple, but medics are strictly forbidden from using their own thumbs to do it. Your thumb actually contains its own major blood vessel with a very strong pulse. If an EMT presses their thumb against your wrist during a chaotic emergency, they might accidentally feel their own elevated heart rate instead of yours. This simple anatomical glitch could lead them to wrongly assume a flatlining patient is doing perfectly fine. They must always use their index and middle fingers to get an accurate reading from your body. 19. Minors are completely incapable of legally refusing medical treatment. If a teenager crashes their skateboard and suffers a head injury, but their parents are not present at the scene, crews do not need parental permission to start life-saving interventions. The law operates under implied consent, assuming any rational parent would want their injured child treated immediately. The medics will simply pack the kid up and transport them, entirely bypassing the missing guardians. Do you think a stubborn teenager should ever have a say in their own emergency care? 20. Threatening to harm yourself instantly strips away your right to stay home. While competent adults can typically refuse medical care, anyone expressing clear suicidal ideation falls under emergency psychiatric protocols. First responders are legally obligated to transport you to a hospital for a professional psychological evaluation, even if you suddenly change your mind and demand they leave. If you resist, they will utilize law enforcement to enforce the transport. It is a serious protective measure designed to save people from their own mental crises. 21. First responders are entirely forbidden from cleaning up your chaotic living room. If you suffer a medical crisis inside an extreme hoarder house, medics will not waste precious time politely moving massive stacks of old newspapers. If the stretcher simply cannot fit through the narrow maze of junk, the fire department is legally authorized to literally remove a window or break down an interior wall to extract you. Your vast collection of antique garbage will never stand in the way of a rescue, but your house will definitely need serious repairs. 22. Every single surface of that truck must be aggressively scrubbed after every transport. Even if a patient simply had a mild headache and barely touched the stretcher, infectious disease protocols demand a rigorous cleaning process. Crews spend a massive portion of their shifts wiping down monitors, replacing linens, and sanitizing the floor with powerful hospital-grade chemicals. They cannot accept a new emergency call until the entire patient compartment is perfectly sterile. It is a totally invisible, exhausting chore that prevents massive community outbreaks. 23. Touching a patient with bare hands is an absolute fireable violation of basic emergency rules. No matter how desperately someone needs help or how perfectly clean they look, first responders must always pause to aggressively snap on their nitrile gloves. This strict mandate is called body substance isolation. It feels completely counterintuitive to delay urgent care even for 3 seconds, but catching a dangerous microscopic bug is a severe mistake. 24. Police handcuffs are absolutely forbidden from being attached to the ambulance stretcher. If a patient is combative or under arrest, law enforcement might want them cuffed directly to the metal rails. Medical protocols strictly prohibit this because if the patient suddenly crashes medically, crews cannot instantly free them to perform CPR. Instead, they use specialized soft medical restraints, or the police officer must physically ride in the back with the key ready. A rigid metal lock can never stand in the way of immediate, necessary emergency resuscitation. 25. Blaring sirens do not grant the magical ability to fly through traffic lights. When approaching a red light or a stop sign, the driver of an emergency vehicle is legally required to bring the massive truck to a complete stop, establish eye contact with other drivers, and manually clear every single lane before proceeding. Assuming that civilian drivers will naturally yield is a fatal mistake. The loud noise often causes panicked civilians to behave unpredictably, meaning the medic driving must be the most defensive, cautious person on the entire busy road. 26. Using a child to translate medical terms for their parent is heavily frowned upon and often prohibited. If a patient does not speak English, crews cannot legally rely on their bilingual 7-year-old to accurately explain the complexities of chest pain or medication allergies. Federal guidelines regarding informed consent require responders to use official language line translation services over the radio whenever possible. Medical terminology is incredibly precise, and losing crucial context in a casual family translation can easily lead to a fatal medical error. 27. Paramedics will absolutely never chase you if you suddenly panic and sprint away from the scene. If a confused or scared patient runs into a dark park or down an alley, medical crews are strictly ordered to stay firmly planted near their truck. They are not athletic bounty hunters. Running blindly into unknown, potentially dangerous territory completely violates their core safety rules. They simply call the police dispatcher and wait. 28. Your paramedic might literally be operating on 0 hours of sleep, and it is entirely legal. While truck drivers have heavily regulated driving limits, medical shift protocols in many areas still allow crews to work brutal 24-hour shifts. If it is a chaotic weekend, they might run 20 consecutive calls without ever closing their eyes. They are legally allowed to calculate complex drug dosages and navigate massive trucks while entirely exhausted. It is a highly controversial industry standard that relies heavily on sheer adrenaline. 29. If you are found completely unconscious on the sidewalk without a wallet, medics will immediately raid your smartphone. Even if your phone is heavily locked with a passcode, federal privacy rules allow them to access your emergency medical ID screen. They bypass your lock screen to read your listed allergies, blood type, and emergency contacts. This strict protocol essentially turns your private piece of technology into a highly visible medical bracelet. It guarantees that they can instantly notify your family without ever actually hacking into your private data. 30. Medics frequently use their own hands as temporary medical charts during chaotic situations. Instead of fumbling for a fragile notepad in the rain, they use a permanent marker to write vital signs, medication doses, and the time directly onto the blue nitrile gloves they are wearing. This strict habit ensures critical numbers are never forgotten during the chaotic transfer to the emergency room. Once they verbally deliver the information to the hospital nurses, they simply peel the heavily scribbled gloves off and throw the messy temporary records into the trash. 31. Refusing a ride to the hospital requires you to endure a highly uncomfortable speech about your own demise. When you sign an against medical advice form, crews are legally forced to look you in the eye and explicitly state that your decision could lead to permanent disability or death. They cannot sugarcoat it. It is a harsh, mandatory scare tactic designed to protect them from massive future lawsuits if you suddenly collapse an hour later. Would you confidently sign that terrifying piece of paper or just cave in and take the expensive ride? 32. Taking a quick selfie on the job is a fantastic way for a paramedic to get instantly fired. Federal privacy laws are so incredibly strict that having a personal phone visible near a patient can trigger a massive federal investigation. Even if the crew just wants a picture of a bizarrely parked car at the scene, catching a patient's shoe in the background is a fireable offense. First responders must treat their smartphones like absolute contraband. The ultimate medical secret is that your personal privacy is guarded closer than nuclear launch codes. 33. Stretcher weight limits are an absolute mathematical boundary that cannot be negotiated. Standard ambulance cots are rigorously tested to hold around 700 pounds. If a patient exceeds this specific capacity, the regular crew cannot transport them without risking a catastrophic equipment collapse. They must request a highly specialized bariatric ambulance equipped with hydraulic lifts and heavy-duty ramps. It feels extremely insensitive, but defying the strict engineering limits of a metal bed is a guaranteed way to injure absolutely everyone. 34. Demanding to be taken to your favorite hospital is usually a complete waste of breath. Ambulances are not personal taxis, and destination protocols are governed by regional trauma systems. If you suffer a severe stroke or major physical trauma, crews must bypass closer, smaller hospitals to reach specialized medical centers equipped for your specific emergency. They base this decision strictly on the required level of care, not your personal preference or where your primary doctor works. Your loyalty to a specific local clinic simply does not matter. 35. Dropping a massive curse word on the main dispatch radio is a remarkably fast way to attract the federal government. Every single radio transmission made by an ambulance crew is permanently recorded and actively monitored by the Federal Communications Commission. If a medic accidentally leaves their microphone clicked open and shouts a severe profanity because they spilled hot coffee on their lap, the agency can face thousands of dollars in strict federal fines. 36. First responders are strictly mandated by law to act as undercover detectives regarding abuse. If they step into a home and notice suspicious signs of neglect, elder abuse, or unsafe living conditions for children, they cannot simply treat the immediate injury and leave. They are legally designated as mandatory reporters. Failing to silently notify state authorities about a suspicious environment can result in the complete loss of their medical license. They are constantly judging your living room, ensuring the unseen environment is totally safe. 37. A paramedic can never simply drop you off in a hospital bed and silently walk away. The legal transfer of care is a heavily regulated verbal ritual. The medic must find the specific registered nurse or doctor assigned to your room and deliver a highly structured, rapid-fire presentation of your vital signs, medications, and history. Until that nurse explicitly says they accept the patient, the ambulance crew is still legally responsible for you. It is a chaotic game of medical relay, and the invisible baton is your official patient chart. 38. Seeing a police cruiser aggressively following an ambulance with its lights flashing does not mean a VIP is inside. It usually implies something went terribly wrong. Protocol dictates that if a patient becomes violent, highly combative, or is officially under arrest, an armed officer must physically ride in the back of the medical truck. First responders are trained strictly to heal, not to wrestle angry patients. That trailing police car is essentially a highly visible security detail to ensure the medics actually survive the short trip to the hospital. 39. If someone calls for an ambulance but immediately drives themselves to the hospital before it arrives, the crew cannot just leave. Bureaucratic protocols force the medics to legally document a cancellation on the scene. They must physically knock on the empty house door, verify with bystanders that the patient is actually gone, and fill out complex federal paperwork proving they attempted to provide care. This incredibly annoying rule prevents massive lawsuits from people claiming the ambulance simply ignored their emergency call and never bothered to show up. 40. Family members are generally strictly banned from riding in the back of the ambulance alongside the patient. While you want to hold your loved one's hand, the patient compartment is a highly hazardous workspace. A distressed relative crying or standing up to get a better look blocks access to critical medical cabinets and physically interferes with life-saving procedures. Relatives are firmly instructed to drive their own cars or sit quietly up front in the passenger seat, completely separated from the intense medical action happening directly behind them. 41. The flashing lights completely vanish when it comes to standard inter-facility transfers. A huge portion of ambulance work involves simply driving stable patients from a small clinic to a larger hospital purely for insurance purposes. During these incredibly mundane trips, using lights and sirens is strictly prohibited by law. Crews must casually navigate afternoon traffic, just like a regular delivery van. Can you imagine the sheer boredom of driving a giant emergency truck slowly through rush hour while your totally stable patient takes a quiet nap? 42. Time is a highly weaponized legal concept inside the patient compartment. Crews cannot just estimate when they gave you a medication. They must strictly synchronize their actions with the official dispatch clock. Every single intervention, from applying a bandage to pushing a cardiac drug, is documented down to the exact minute. In a court of law, if it was not officially time-stamped, it legally never happened. Medics are obsessed with checking their watches because a simple 3-minute documentation error can completely destroy their entire career. 43. Ambulances are essentially terrible bricks on wheels when it comes to severe winter weather. Despite being emergency vehicles, they do not possess magical traction. Strict driving protocols mandate massive speed reductions during rain or snow. Driving a top-heavy, 10,000-pound box of expensive medical gear on slick ice is a terrifying nightmare. Crews must meticulously apply tire chains and crawl to your house. Would you rather wait an extra 10 minutes for help, or have the ambulance crash into a snowy ditch 2 blocks from your driveway? 44. If a paramedic starts giving you advanced care, like IV medications or heart monitoring, they cannot hand you over to an EMT with a lower certification level just to take a break. Legally, the person with the highest medical training who starts treating you must stay with you until a doctor takes over at the hospital. If they leave you with someone less qualified, it is considered a serious legal offense called patient abandonment. Once that high-level care begins, that specific medic is strictly locked in with you for the entire ride, no matter what. 45. Hollywood completely lied to you about rubbing heavy electrical paddles together to shock a heart. Modern medical protocols strictly forbid those dramatic television devices. Today, crews are required to use highly advanced, sticky adhesive pads that attach directly to the patient's chest and back. This incredibly precise technology analyzes the hidden electrical rhythms flawlessly and removes the severe danger of accidentally electrocuting the rescuer. The days of shouting clear and slamming metal irons onto a chest are purely cinematic fiction now. 46. Handing out oxygen is no longer a universal cure-all. For decades, strapping an oxygen mask on every single patient was the standard procedure. Today, medical science recognizes that oxygen is technically a drug, and giving too much can actually harm people with specific conditions, like certain strokes or chronic lung diseases. First responders must carefully measure your exact blood saturation levels before turning on the tank. The days of treating pure oxygen like harmless magic air are officially over, replaced by precise, calculated pharmacological science. 47. When a medic officially declares someone dead in a house, they cannot simply whisper it to their partner. Legal protocol strictly demands they physically check their watch and confidently announce the exact time of death out loud to the entire room. This verbal declaration officially transitions the situation from an active medical emergency into a formal legal proceeding. The specific minute they speak becomes permanently etched on a government death certificate. It is a highly chilling, incredibly heavy sentence to speak in front of a crying family. 48. Requesting a dramatic helicopter rescue is completely useless if there is a tiny bit of dense fog. Ground crews must strictly abide by the stringent aviation weather minimums set by flight dispatchers. Medical helicopters are incredibly sensitive machines and cannot legally launch into severe storms, high winds, or low visibility. If the sky is entirely gray, the paramedics are stuck aggressively driving you to the trauma center, no matter how bad the traffic is. The absolute greatest medical technology on Earth is frequently defeated by a simple cloud. 49. Emergency crews are trained to never use their last names while actively treating unpredictable patients. Standard safety rules dictate they only use first names or generic titles like medic or partner. This creates a firm professional boundary. If a patient is under the influence of drugs or severely mentally unstable, knowing a medic's full legal name allows them to stalk the rescuer online or find their home address later. Anonymity is a strictly enforced shield that protects first responders from the dangerous consequences of the violent people they treat. Alright, we have covered 49 wild facts and only one remains. But before number 50, it is time for the final verdict. The award for the absolute dumbest rule goes to the legal gag order on diagnosis. It is painfully stupid that a veteran medic knows exactly that you are having a stroke, but the law forces them to play a game of charades using vague words just because they are not a doctor. Do you agree with this verdict, or is there an even more ridiculous rule on this list? Let us know in the comments. And now, our final number. 50. The mountain of legal paperwork actually takes significantly longer than saving your life. Once the dramatic hospital transfer is complete, crews face their most rigid mandate, the patient care report. This massive, incredibly detailed legal document requires them to log every single tiny observation, drug dosage, and vital sign. A 20-minute medical emergency routinely requires 45 minutes of intense typing. If it is not meticulously documented, they can be sued years later. Writing the complex story is far harder than actually living it. Emergency medicine is a completely wild world where saving a life is just as much about rigid paperwork as it is about sheer adrenaline. So, if you were forced to work a 24-hour shift under these insane conditions, how quickly would you quit? Drop your honest answers in the comments below. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden medical secrets, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible facts. Stay safe out there.